I'm joined again today by an extremely important guest. She's not just an activist, she's not just a role model, she's not just a hero mom. Lyn Ulbricht is fighting for the constitutional rights of anyone who has been wrongly incarcerated. Lyn, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks so much, Jason, for giving me this opportunity. It's always good to talk to you.
Likewise, Lyn. It's a pleasure to see you again. You and I have been in touch since we met a few months ago at Acapulco. We're always running into each other. You're very busy, I'm very busy, so I'm really pleased that you were able to find some time today to speak to me about this. Before we get into the conversation, I do want to remind all of our viewers that they should visit freeross.org and sign the petition to commute Ross's sentence. Most people are going to know that Ross Ulbricht has been imprisoned for life for his role in creating a website that other people used to sell illegal goods. And I think this is a really poignant moment, Lyn, for you and I to get together and discuss Ross's situation, because as we speak, Mark Zuckerberg is before Congress testifying about Facebook creating this Libra coin, which is analogous in many ways to the Bitcoin cryptocurrency that was used to conduct transactions on Ross's website, Silk Road. And Congress representatives even went into great detail how videos and images of child pornography have been traded on Facebook more than any other site, according to Congress. Yet Mark Zuckerberg is not imprisoned for life. What can you tell us about Ross's current situation and your feelings about how Congress is handling all of this?
Well, we've always said that, making a website host liable for criminal activity on the site opens a huge slippery slope. It's vicarious liability. It's saying you are responsible for anything anybody does on your site. And actually, in a civil case, this wouldn't be allowed. But in a criminal case, which Ross is the first person to under this to be given this kind of sentence, or possibly any sentence. So it doesn't seem fair that Facebook and Craigslist and Amazon and eBay, and I'm sure they know it, sell illegal goods. And there was no child pornography or anything related to pedophilia on Silk Road. It was completely based on the non-aggression principle of no force and not creating victims, free choice. And so I just want to have people understand the intention there was not evil. His situation now is that we went all the way to the Supreme Court and were unsuccessful. So now we are really urging President Trump to look at Ross's case and his sentence specifically, because it sets a terrible precedent for excessive sentencing. And we are hoping and praying that he will commute this sentence, which is so excessive and so unjust and unnecessary, that he will commute this sentence.
It's so upsetting to consider the murderers, the rapists, the kidnappers, the child abusers, people who have done really serious harm, destroyed lives, who get 15, 20 years in jail and then they're let go. Ross currently has no hope other than a presidential pardon of being released. Isn't that right?
Well, there is a Hail Mary effort in the district court in New York City, where I do not expect to get very much help, which is called a habeas petition, and that has been filed. Again, it's very, very hard to get. So, and what I heard is they have their 7 best prosecutors working on it against us. So that's pretty intimidating. And, but we hold out hope for everything. We hold out hope for everything because, and I really do believe that eventually Ross will be free. But, it would be, I'm just hoping it's not so long that he is wasted in there. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he's already spent more than 6 years in prison. He's a young man, so this is becoming an increasingly significant portion of his life spent
Yes.
behind bars. He's such a handsome young man, so capable, obviously created this website, and he's very into the non-aggression kind of, I guess they call it the anarchy movement, and you and I met in Anarchapulco. People know that that's not chaos, right? Am I wrong? Am I miscategorizing? I thought that's what it was, financial freedom and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I don't know if Ross would call himself an anarchist, and of course that has so many connotations, but
Right.
definitely voluntary interaction, voluntarist, and non-aggression principle. I mean, it's in the evidence in the court that things that hurt other people were not permitted, and this is the government's own testimony. Now, people can argue that drugs hurt people, but the point of view of the Silk Road administrators was, well, it's a free choice between two people, not a third party. Right. And you and I discussed that before. Look, we can argue. I'm not pro-drugs. I really think, I'm not for that. I think it was a terrible mistake, but Ross admits it was. He was young. He was 26 years old, very passionate about freedom, free markets, unimpaired exchanges among people. And so, we all make mistakes in our 20s, but we don't all have to pay for it with the rest of our lives. Yeah. And I don't think that should happen to any nonviolent person. It's just terribly costly on so many levels, including the taxpayer money, and so unnecessary and really barbaric, and wasn't true before the 80s. This is not American. It's not like this is what America should be doing. It's came out of the 80s and the drug war and government, various things passed in the government to placate the tough on crime people. But the problem is it doesn't work. That's the thing about the drug war. You can be against drugs. I'm against drugs. But it doesn't work. It's been over 45 years. So you could call it the longest American war. And over $1 billion of taxpayer money, which we need. And people are still doing drugs more than ever. Yeah. It doesn't, and it's created violence and all kinds of things. It's just it doesn't work, except it makes some people and some government agencies a lot of money. Yep. And actually shreds our Constitution, because there's what's called the drug exception, where, well, it's about drugs, so Bill of Rights out the window. Yes, wow. Civil asset forfeiture, where they can stop people, and if they have cash, they can seize their cash. Yeah. Even if they haven't been charged with it. I mean, things like that. Oh, well, it might be drugs. And it's become a slippery slope there, too.
Yeah. We just did a story last night on More Pain, and Michael Moore of True Pundit pointed out that Greece a few months ago had seized a cargo ship containing 33 million Captagon pills. And Michael went on to detail how these illegal meth factories are popping up around Syria. And he even went as far as suggesting that it's possible that some of these never-ending wars are created in part to enable these types of international drug manufacturing rings. We heard, of course, that Nancy Pelosi took a delegation to the Middle East in a very unusual move for the Speaker of the House to be engaging in international diplomacy. Of course, it doesn't implicate Speaker Pelosi in this, but we've heard about Iran-Contra, how cocaine went from Nicaragua to the United States through Mina Airport while Bill Clinton was the governor. I'm sure you're well familiar with the numerous women who have accused Bill Clinton of violent rape, yet Bill Clinton is writing books. He was elected president. He's running fraudulent charities to the tune of billions of dollars, while your son sits in jail. That's got to really burn.
Well, there's terrible disparity in sentencing. I mean, the biggest drug seller who was convicted of being the biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years. Wow. He has the same offense level as Ross, yes. It's on our homepage. And then it goes down from there. It's such a disparity. It's so wrong. And the man who was running the copycat site Silk Road 2 after Silk Road was taken down, which the government said was identical. They said that it sold more drugs in a month. He got no time. Wow. He got 2 years back taxes. His name's Blake Benthall, and that was revealed by Vice. That otherwise it wouldn't be known. We knew he was somewhere. We knew he was released, but no one had heard about him. Like, what happened to him? You know? Yeah. So whether he had blackmail on somebody, which I kind of think, or you know, was working for the government, giving them enough value that they're willing to just let him go, I don't know. Wow. But it's wrong. That shouldn't be happening. And actually, it's against the law. Congress passed an act that said that sentences for relatively the same thing should be relatively the same. Wow. And, you know, so yeah, and by the way, just since you brought up Bill Clinton, I just want to mention that Bill Clinton is basically responsible for the Third Strike Act, which means that if you commit a third crime, you will get life automatically. And this is, you know, okay, so I know Ross knows someone in prison right now who his third strike was marijuana. He's serving life for marijuana in the state of Colorado in a federal prison. Another guy who I actually met, and by the way, I had been corresponding with that guy's mom. I actually met this other one. It was residue on a dollar bill was his third strike. He's essentially doing life for residue on a dollar bill. Wow. This Third Strike Act is terrible. And Bill Clinton is the one that pushed it through. It has been changed by the First Step Act to be 25 years instead of life, unless you're already in there for the third strike, and then you don't get the 25 years. You still have to do life, which makes absolutely no sense. It's like, yeah, slavery's wrong, so we're going to end it, except if you're already a slave, then you have to stay that way. It's just insane. And this is the kind of, but it's all political, right? And so in any case, I just had to mention that about Bill because, you know, he said, oh, I really feel bad about it. I guess this was during Hillary's campaign. I'm like, well, if you feel so bad about it, why don't you start speaking out about it? Why don't you've got influence. Why don't you do something about it? But in any case, yeah, that's my rant on Bill Clinton. I've seen the damage, what that has been done from that.
And you mentioned the homepage. That's, of course, freeross.org. People can go there and learn all about Ross and what's been going on with him. It's, I'm so sorry, Lyn, because, you know, I keep hoping, as you do, that these efforts will, in fact, succeed. It's hard to understand why all these laws, all these kind of standards are in place. This other guy getting only 2 years. They really have come out hard against Ross, and it's almost inexplicable.
Yeah, well, they said they wanted to make him an example. Of course, it didn't work. In fact, there was a spike in dark net sites after his sentencing. But, you know, that's how our government is very relentless, and they'll go after you. And it's been a real eye-opener for me. Because when all this started, I was pretty patriotic, and I'm not saying I don't love my country. Certainly, the principles that it's based on. Yeah. But I feel like it's been hijacked, and is being hijacked, and I can see it up close and personal with how the justice system operates and how we no longer have fair trials. That's why 98% of people who are arrested plea. They're bullied and threatened by prosecutors to not go to trial. Because if they do and lose, which they statistically will, they'll get a much worse sentence. And so you just by that number alone, you know, innocent people are saying, oh, okay, I'll plea no matter, you know, to get the. This isn't how it's supposed to work. Yeah. But prosecutors run the show, and they have every incentive to, you know, convict people. It's for their career, and so it's been really disillusioning to see how it works. And we just hope, Ross and I and our family, that his case can help shine a light on this so that this really hideous situation with mass incarceration, these terrible sentences, the destruction on families will end. It's just got to.
Yeah, and one of the things that initially struck me when you and I first met, just even in short conversation, I mean, you just seem like somebody who would be friends with my mom, for example. You're like a regular American mom who, by fate, was thrust into this situation. And as you're saying, you had confidence in the government. You thought everything was fine until you were subjected to this real world situation where, you know, I mean, I've called today's episode, Lyn Ulbricht Speaks Out Against Excessive Sentencing in Post-Constitutional America. If you could, for a moment, touch on the ways in which Ross's constitutional rights had to be violated to put him in jail like this.
Well, let's just go down the Bill of Rights. First Amendment is free speech. The judge said, it's in the record, that she says, we know that it's notable that you started the site for philosophical reasons, but I'm just not sure it's a philosophy left behind. Basically saying, well, this dangerous philosophy of voluntary interaction and free exchange cannot be tolerated, and you have to go to prison for life. This is a First Amendment problem. Then we have the Fourth Amendment problem, which actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court because the government, without a warrant, without probable cause, delved into Ross's internet activity and put a trap and trace device on his router without a warrant. They used it's some kind of device to be able to track him in his house from the street.
Wow.
Is an antenna, a directional antenna, that's what it was.
Whoa.
And so they, without a warrant, they can go outside your house right now with a directional antenna and track what room you're in, all of that.
What?
Without a warrant, without probable cause, in secret with no oversight.
Holy
and of
cow.
course, think of the slippery slope that this opens up. It's, you know, our religious affiliations, our political persuasions, our sexual orientation, all of these personal things, our medical records, the apps we use, all of this is available to the government in secret. And the Supreme Court did accept a similar case at the time, which was about cell phones and tracking people with their cell phones, but they didn't. We thought they were going to, we really did, and then they didn't take the Ross's, which was a laptop. But the thing is, they can make your laptop a tracking device without your knowledge and track you anywhere in the world. It's like a collar on an animal. And it's all based on a Supreme Court ruling that's 4 decades old and based on the dial telephone, where it ruled, it's the third-party doctrine, it ruled, well, if you dial a number, just the number, well, it's okay for the government to get that. Well, of course, it's changed just a little bit since then, and literally, the kind of extensive information that's available, and this has not been changed. So that's the Fourth Amendment. Then there's the Sixth Amendment. And there's also due process, which is the Fifth Amendment, and that's going into the trial. And the corrupt agents who are in prison now, who had the ability to completely go through the site, to change things, to act as Dread Pirate Roberts, the administrator of the site, who Ross is accused of being the only one.
Yeah.
They could be that one. There's all kinds of, there's evidence of tainted and tampered with evidence. This was not allowed to be known to the jury. That is a due process problem.
Prosecutorial misconduct. They're denying the Brady material.
Yeah. Yep. And then we go to the Sixth Amendment, which is the judge used murder for hire allegations by the Southern District of New York that Ross planned murder for hire. However, and they told the media and all this stuff, but when it came around to indicting him for trial, it wasn't there. And it wasn't charged at trial. And it was never ruled on by a jury. And in fact, in Maryland, there was another indictment that mentioned it, and that has been dismissed with prejudice. So there's no charge. But the judge relied on this to justify her draconian sentence. And this is a violation of the Sixth Amendment, because the Sixth Amendment guarantees us protection from a rogue judge or a rogue prosecutor, because we're to be judged only by the jury of our peers, 12 people, not one judge. And when I heard that they were going to be allowed to even mention this at trial, I said to our lawyer, how can they do that? And he goes, oh, yeah, they do that. They do that. And apparently Scalia was very upset about this and thing that they can take people who are acquitted or not even charged, and the judge can go, well, never mind, I think they're guilty, I believe it, and and this is total violation of the Sixth Amendment. And that was another Supreme Court, went to the Supreme Court with, by the way, our lawyer, who's fantastic, was with one of the best law firms in the country, Williams and Connolly. This was a very, and they took us, not because we could pay their usual fee, but because they thought it was such an important case. And our lawyer had clerked for Scalia.
But aren't Williams and Connolly, I'm sorry to interrupt, Lyn, aren't Williams and Connolly connected to the Clintons?
I know we brought that up before. I don't think our lawyer is. And actually he's no longer there. So I can't comment on that. But he is fantastic, and the people that work for him. So he actually isn't there anymore. So I don't know. I believe that he is a very good man who, I'm sure he is, who clerked for Scalia.
Wow.
And believes he's a Fourth Amendment expert also. Yeah. So in any case, that's right. You brought that up before when we talked before. But in any case, it was a really good brief. It was the cert petition, and they punted that one too. It seems to be something they don't want to deal with, that these judges can use charges not ruled on by a jury. It's like, so again, we don't have fair trials.
No.
We don't have it's all distorted, and so those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure at the end of this I'll go, oh, I should have mentioned that and that, because there's so many.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that's interesting
shocking
about what you're describing with the murder for hire charge, there was no attempt to get involved in murder for hire on Ross's part. He had nothing to do with murder for hire. There was no evidence of that. It was purely concocted, and it's essentially a social engineering play, because what happens now is, the moment that's said, it's actually really helped me to understand some attacks that are happening from other social engineers. For instance, someone puts out there into the social media sphere this notion of a murder for hire charge. It doesn't matter to the court of public opinion if it's been to trial, if it's true, if it's false. It's just out there. Now, when articles get written about Ross, they can simply say he was previously facing controversial murder for hire charges, but they were dropped. So someone reads this knowing...
This guy said they were dropped. That's
right.
I mean, I appreciate that.
That's at least a plus, right. But the thing that happens is, a lot of people will see this perhaps for the first time. Maybe they don't know Ross's story, and they see this article and they say, oh, this guy's a drug dealer and a murderer and a gangster, because it's written here on a page. And what it does is it erodes the possibility of public support for the effort that you have been involved in for 6 years to try to free Ross at freeross.org. And this Inquisitor article talks about Mike Cernovich, I guess through Twitter, appealing to President Trump to commute the sentence that Ross is facing right now. And Cernovich is a controversial guy. I have to applaud him for using his large platform to try to do good. Has this had any impact? Have you heard anything from President Trump or anyone in his administration with regard to Ross?
No, but we are working on it. We are putting together a clemency package with letters from leaders and others asking President Trump to commute Ross's sentence. And we're getting some really wonderful letters, some really great people. And I think we can do this. I really do. I mean, one of Cernovich's Twitter threads a while ago was also that it would help Trump in the election to do it. And he listed all of these reasons. And, Ross is a hero to many people who understand that a lot of this smearing is false. And by the way, they do this routinely, apparently. Who knew?
Yeah.
Well, of course, Julian Assange, they're always talking how he's a rapist, but it never went to court. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe. Why didn't it go to court then?
Yeah.
But others have told me, criminal justice lawyers go, oh, yeah, they do that. And actually people who have said it was done to them. This is par for the course business as usual with prosecutors, and they manipulate the press. And of course, it's so much more exciting to talk about good boy gone bad and murder for hire than, the truth. Or, oh, drugs were sold on Silk Road. Well, so was raw milk, but that's not so interesting, right? Or books or electronics or jewelry. So, and even in the courtroom, the prosecutors completely controlled the narrative. So the judge did not allow Ross's libertarian views to be known to the jury. There was no mention, could be no mention that there were legal things sold there, that it was more like an eBay. Mm-hmm. There was no mention that the most commonly traded drug was cannabis, user amounts of cannabis. Mm-hmm. All of those potentially mitigating things in the minds of a jury were not permitted to be known. And a testimony by someone on Silk Road showing basically that there were more than one Dread Pirate Roberts, and that's anecdotally very widespread knowledge, was not allowed to be known to the jury, even though our lawyer fought to have it known to the jury. So, it was a manipulated trial. In addition, the government's own witness, who was an investigator from Homeland Security, said there were more than one DPR. He also said that his main suspect was Mark Karpeles. He was completely after Mark Karpeles. He never thought it was Ross, and that was not allowed to be. Well, it came out the first day of trial, and then by the third day, the judge said, "Forget you ever heard it, jury."
Wow.
This is stricken from the record.
About Mark Karpeles?
About an alternate perpetrator, that maybe it wasn't Ross, and this is based on the government witness's own evidence. And maybe it was the third day of trial. Anyway, it was early in the trial, and and the jury it was anytime it got close to talking about it, the prosecution would object, the judge would sustain, and that was completely squashed.
And this guy, Mark Karpeles, he was the Mt. Gox CEO that had that incredible hack. I don't know that much about the history of Mt. Gox and Bitcoin and everything, but that's quite interesting that this guy was involved with he was the CEO of what is associated with the single largest Bitcoin, hack type, theft type money loss event. And then here he is in the middle of this situation, and the judge tells people not to even consider it. What basis was there for that? None. That
the government witness couldn't speak for another agent who had told him this, I believe. It was that it was hearsay because he personally wasn't at a meeting in Guam where Karpeles' lawyers met with what were corrupt agents, government agents, and offered to give them a name for Dread Pirate Roberts in exchange for them backing off their pursuit of Karpeles. And it gets really complicated. This is all in Railroaded, The Targeting and Caging of Ross Ulbricht, which is a podcast as well as a written out document with 400 citations based on the public record. That's you can click on it on our website, on our homepage. And actually, I've told people, hey, listen to, they said, oh, I was starting to listen to Railroaded, and it was riveting. I couldn't stop. It's a real disclosure of how our justice system works and the rivalries within it, what they're willing to do, the corruption. So it does talk about this whole situation and what happened with Karpeles. And look, I don't know if it was Karpeles. We're just trying to relay what's in the public record for people to draw their own conclusions. Yeah. I do know from the agent, the Homeland Security agent, Jared Deryagan, what he wrote, and it's part of the record, is that up until the end and Ross's arrest, he believed it was Mark Karpeles. He'd been on the site for 2,000 hours, as an undercover agent. He had been on there for 2 years, actually. So it's interesting to hear what he has to say. And, after Karpeles' lawyers offered this name, which I assume was Ross's name, Ross was arrested shortly afterwards. So,
wow. It mirrors so many of the stories we've heard where there's some informant who basically, I mean, they want to put somebody in jail, and for whatever reason, it was Ross. You've spoken before about how people basically equate him with creating the killer app for Bitcoin that put Bitcoin on the map, and that they wanted to make an example out of him. But it just feels so similar to so many other stories where there's some government informant who sets somebody up, and then whatever the evidence is, that guy goes down.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, someone just sent me a link to a video where Catherine Hahn, I believe, is talking about how it was always about the Bitcoin. That's why they were so interested in this. And that's obvious because the other, like the biggest drug seller on Silk Road got 10 years. That doesn't seem to concern them. You know, they talk about protecting us from drug dealers. Well, apparently they're not really that worried about it. But the NSA, the full power of the NSA and the government went after Bitcoin users a few months before Ross was arrested. They were urgently tracking Bitcoin users. I thought they were supposed to be tracking terrorists.
Right.
And by the way, terrorists get a lower sentence than Ross.
Yeah.
John Walker Lynn got 20 years. And Ross gets double life plus 40 years? So that's what they were really worried about. And this was revealed. This is based on Snowden's documents that The Intercept revealed a year ago, March. So, you know, Bitcoin was the thing that had to be fought. And actually, Chuck Schumer said it. And it was very threatening. Of course, financial powers don't want to rival currency, you know.
That's really what it comes down to, right? I mean, that's what's happening with Mark Zuckerberg today. It's amazing. You know, only a body as objectionable as Congress could make you feel sympathetic towards Mark Zuckerberg. But it's essentially the same discussion that's happening today. However, Zuckerberg has billions and is in the public eye to the extent that they really couldn't do to him what they've done to your son. It's so troubling, Lyn. Every time we speak, I just feel so strongly that I wish there was something more that I could do to help Ross. Well,
really... you are helping by giving me a voice here and the opportunity to tell people, please sign the petition.
Yeah.
You know, we're over 217,000 signatures now.
It's great.
So it really does help to get the word out. And you're doing such good work anyway. I mean, just in general, I so appreciate it. I want to say that. And it's funny because this morning I got a Facebook message saying, oh, I'm so excited you're going to be on Jason Goodman's show. He's fantastic. And I'm like, well, he's already interviewed me once. Oh, I didn't know. And that was just right before the show. People are really think highly of you. And so I'm very honored to be on your show. And I do believe it'll happen. I really do.
I feel that in my heart as well. I have this completely unfounded but gut feeling that Ross will be free someday. And my commitment to you, Lyn, is that until that happens, you have an open invitation to appear on this show. And anything that I can do beyond that to help you, I'm willing to do.
Oh, wow. That's really, thank you so much.
I think that everyone should recognize that if this can happen to Ross, this can happen to anyone. And the degree to which the laws are violated, the degree to which our constitutional rights don't actually exist, should scare people so much that all of this equivocating about did Trump tell Ukraine to investigate an actual crime, you know, that's all nonsense. We've got regular Americans who are conducting their lives, trying to innovate and create markets. I mean, you've said this before. They could have said, hey, Ross, you created a market that enabled illegal stuff. 6 years in jail, boom. He would never do it again. And
ever.
He could conduct his life. He could be there, 32, 33, out in the world. I think he strikes me as the type of guy who would be rehabilitated by this type of experience.
Well, he's matured. I mean, he would have anyway, but this has been a very eye-opening, maturing experience for him. But he's still himself, and he's still sweet. He's a very sweet person, compassionate, funny. We have great visits, and in fact, I have followed him around to make sure he does get visits, and I'm not the only one who visits him, but you know, I feel like it's so important for him to have that lifeline out into this world, the free world, because what happens in prison is it just becomes your world. Yeah. And then it changes you. But Ross really hasn't, and he would have so much to contribute. You know, he's very intelligent.
Yeah.
And he's very idealistic still, and has written a lot of things on our website freeross.org. There's a Who is Ross, and if you drop down, there's writings. It's also on Medium. If you search him on Medium, he's written some very good things. He wrote an essay called "The 5 Keys to Inner Strength I Learned in 5 Years in Prison," and it's really inspiring. And actually, a lot of the things he wrote inspire me to keep going, because it's a long, hard haul to keep going and keep going. But of course, being a mom, I'm trapped. I can't stop as long as he's in that cage. I can't.
Certainly
you know,
not.
so.
And I've read a lot of the things that you've written about him, that he's tutoring people in prison. He's encouraging guys who are getting released to go to college. I mean, this is such a difference from what we hear about some of the other people that are in prison. Even Ross's previous experience, gangs were trying to get him involved in violence. He risked his own safety to avoid that. Right. Thankfully, he was able to be moved to a less dangerous facility where he's not getting involved in that stuff. But this is someone who has demonstrated repeatedly that even when placed in the worst possible situation, he's looking for ways to remain positive, to improve his situation and the situation of other people around him. I mean, we can see from some of the photos online, he's maturing, he's getting older, he's in his 30s now.
He's 35.
Oh, 35, I didn't realize. Oh, because, several years passed during the trial.
He's 29, yeah. And
we've spoken.
And, you know.
Sorry.
Oh, well, I'm just saying he's teaching classes where he is now. He's always taught classes and helped people get in college from prison, as well as get their high school diplomas. He's tutored, and there's 100 letters on freeross.org that where 100 people wrote about Ross's character. They're people who know him, and 4 of them are fellow inmates. And I have guards come up to me and say, what is he doing in here? He shouldn't be in here, because he's in a maximum security prison, as if he is a danger. But it's because of his sentence. I mean, if it were just based on his security score, he would be in a camp. But he's in a maximum, and has been. Wow. So it's absurd.
Even at this point, moving him to that type of camp where he'd have more access to outside facilities and he'd be interacting with more like accountants who are in jail rather than actual drug criminals, would be better. But they won't do that even.
And the visitation's better, it's easier, and not as controlled. And well, that's the law. If you have a life sentence, well, it's not actually the law. It is up to the prison. But I believe, it's the custom that if you have a life sentence, you might be a flight risk, and so you have to be in a maximum.
Wow.
But it's just, actually Joe Biden came out, even though he helped put people in prison, he came out and said he didn't think any nonviolent person should be in prison. And I think there's something to that. I actually think the same, because we have a technology like ankle bracelets and things like that, where you can, and it would save tons of money. And I think restitution for your crimes and paying back if you can makes a lot more sense. I mean, if I were, say, had something stolen from me, I'd much rather have that person pay me back than pay taxes to keep in prison and become a worse criminal.
Yes.
Because that's what it is. It's a criminal training ground. It's ridiculous. And we're the biggest incarcerator on the planet. I mean, if the prison population, which by the way has metastasized 800% since the 80s, if it were a state, it would be bigger than 11 states.
Wow. It's amazing.
I mean, it's becoming a state of incarceration. It's like its own state. It's horrible.
Hard to remain the land of the free when we have the largest incarcerated population in the world. And while I agree with the sentiment from Joe Biden, I think it's unfair to not comment that it's probable that Joe Biden is taking up this position because of the likelihood that his own son will face prison for actual drug use and endangering other people. He's driving around in rental cars, smoking cigarettes with crack in them. I think Joe Biden's a very self-serving and selfish kind of guy. But you raise another really important point. Joe Biden and his son are involved in financial crimes that weren't intended to support anyone's freedom or create any kind of unrestricted interaction. They were strictly abuse of power and embezzling and theft of money for their own greed. So it's interesting to look at these different politically powerful individuals and how they are able to defy the law with no consequences. It makes me so angry about what's happened with Ross.
Yeah, again, the sentencing and the law being applied is not equal in this country. And, look, the hypocrisy, I assumed it was that the Biden would want to backtrack on his record of putting people in prison because he was a big part of that. But, that's an interesting point. I mean, Chuck Schumer now is all for marijuana legalization. I'm like, really? You put a lot of people in prison over it. And people said, well, what about them? And he goes, well, that's another story. That's not up to me or something. And he took $100,000 from the private prisons. Schumer did. So, but yet I'm all for kumbaya. Let's, if you're not hurting someone else, then it's okay. And I'm like, why? Have you been reading the Silk Road Manifesto? That's what they said. It's just the hypocrisy is stunning sometimes with politicians.
Oh, yeah. Chuck Schumer is such an absolutely horrendous person. I really wish that he will someday see justice for some of the things that he has done to towards the destruction of the Constitution, including the things he said with regard to Ross. I mean, he was on the banking committee when this all happened.
Senate Finance Committee.
Sorry, Senate Finance Committee.
Oh,
I'm one of his constituents. Both. Wow.
He was on both.
Wow. I tell you, Lyn, what's happening is all of the topics that have become of interest on Crowdsource the Truth are essentially in play in this case against Ross. It's the spying. I mean, what you told us at the top of the interview about this antenna that can look into your home, I have not heard about that before. I've heard about the NSA spying from Bill Binney. I was just watching
Well, it's very similar to what Bill Binney talks about. Yep.
But what you've said goes beyond what Bill Binney has spoken about. I didn't know they could sit outside your house and look into it with an antenna. I mean, how is this allowed? How can the law enforcement individuals that are doing this allow it to happen? That could be turned right around on them. It's so short-sighted, irresponsible, and dangerous. It's hard to find words.
No, I know. I was shocked too. It's in the Supreme Court cert petition. It's right there. And they have that power. The point is, without a warrant, without probable cause, without the permission of a judge, in secret, with no oversight. That's the part that gets to me. It's like, look, it's bad enough if they do it with a warrant, but at least they have to go through some steps. That just doesn't seem to matter here.
No. Or anywhere, as a matter of fact.
Again, third-party doctrine, which is this antiquated, the courts are not keeping up with technology and the power of technology. And so the government is just going full speed ahead with technology, trampling on these our constitutional rights, saying, well, maybe the founders said, we can't seize papers, but a computer's not papers. It's not paper. And I'm like, okay, really? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's obviously what they meant.
The founding fathers really blew it there, didn't they?
They didn't anticipate Bitcoin. I don't know how they could have missed that.
But how could that have happened?
Lyn, we see this happening on the highest levels. Adam Schiff is holding these closed-door hearings where they're listening to anonymous witnesses who, in this case, the accused is the President of the United States and a billionaire, and even he can't confront his accusers, can't be given due process. Evil, disgusting people like Adam Schiff, who is a troll of Chuck Schumer, obviously, and a close comrade of him. These people are destroying our country by eroding our rights, and unfortunately, your family and your son have become one of the first and most notable test cases in this post-constitutional excessive incarceration environment, it's troubling to me that people sit by and cheer for this.
Well, yeah, I think people get caught up in what they want to happen, and I understand that and what they believe is true, but we have to go by the rule of law or we're all in trouble. We have, and that's, we're all in danger, in peril, because, it's very weakened, but, if it gets worse, it really worries me too. It's like, I'm like, are we going to be a surveillance state? Are we going to be a state? We are.
We are.
It's true.
They looked into your son's home. They plucked him out of there.
True.
They threw away the evidence that would have exonerated him, and they stuck him in a cage where he is right now. It's terrible.
It's true.
Now, Lyn,
and he's not unique either. There's many thousands of nonviolent people who are over-sentenced to the point of, and let me just say quickly, not only is it these people, it's their families and their children. Exactly. And this is what's so heartbreaking when you go in there. And I get to know the people, and I get to know the prisoners and all of that, and of course Ross does, and to see these children so happy to see their dad and then being torn away and sobbing and shattered and messing up in school and all of this stuff that happens as a result of this. Right. It's got a huge ripple effect, and they are statistically more likely to be part of this mass incarceration machine and churned up in this money-making, power-grabbing machine that is mass incarceration now. And it's really bad.
It is.
It's evil.
And, I mean, you're describing a situation that it's impossible to compile the statistics of the impact on crime and the deterioration of society in the future when, like, I'm just picturing in my mind a child whose relationship with their father or mother evolves while that parent is in prison. That child's going to have a very distorted childhood that could, as you said, lead them to acting out, problems that lead to crimes as they age, that create this cycle that I know there's a lot of people who are going to just shut off their minds and say they're prisoners, they're criminals, we don't care, keep them in there. But people really need to think about this. I mean, this is the same thing as just like taking a pill to make some symptom go away and introducing some side effect that's perhaps worse than the initial problem that you're trying to cure. We need a sensible approach to law and justice in this country that we simply don't have. Now, I want to ask you some questions, but I want to be very sensitive to not asking anything upsetting. So if I do ask anything that you don't feel like discussing, you can just tell me to stop. But as I've looked through some of the pictures of Ross in preparation for today's conversation, I've noticed, as you said, he's 35 now. He's much older than when this occurred. And we can see in the photographs, he's physically changing, he's mentally changing. What have you noticed about Ross that has changed since he's gone into prison?
Well, as I say, he's definitely more mature. And I guess I would say that prison has taught him a lot of things. It's a real laboratory in there. And so, but he's managed it very well. It's hard. He's managed to not have conflicts for the most part. And if he has, he's handled those. To stay out of trouble. It's very easy to get sucked into the various dramas going on in there. And to, I think, be not as naive. He was very naive. He was young and zealous and kind of naive, very naive. And Ross is not so naive. He's had some very hard lessons, and he's paid a very big price, and he's so far continuing to. And he's a quick learner, so he's not one of these people that would get out and do it again and get thrown back in at all. Right. He's definitely a quick learner, and would never do it again. And and by the way, that picture of him looking like a criminal that was for a special. No, down a little bit. Anyway, it's got he's looking into a mirror.
Yeah. This one.
He took it for Mustache Day or something, for some kind of fundraiser, and they use it all the time to make him go, "Oh, look at this criminal," and it was for that. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. That's how the media warps things. They,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, oh, take that picture because that's, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, they don't want to show any of the nice pictures of him with his loving mother, with his sister, with his father. And I mean, the other thing we should mention is that a lot of the comments are telling us that this is actually not new. There are a lot of other people who are in situations that
absolutely.
are somewhat similar to Ross.
I say it's not unique.
Yeah. And it's at least nice that
That's
Ross.
why I always speak out. That's why I always say the whole system is bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm working with people who are in there as much as I can. I can't do that much. But helping, you know, parents and siblings of people who are in there to help them. Hey, this is how you put up a petition, or this is what. Because no, it's absolutely. There's over 17,000 nonviolent people serving life.
And it's another reason why you and your effort are so important, because not all of these people have loving families who have the wherewithal, whether it's financial or intellectual, to make this kind of effort to help their person. I do want to mention that people should go to freeross.org and click on the donate button, because everything that Lyn and her family are doing to protect and help Ross, it all costs money. Lawyers, traveling around. Obviously, so much of Lyn's time is occupied in looking after this effort and trying to whatever extent she's able, to make Ross's time in prison more bearable. So I hope that Crowdsource the Truth viewers will visit freeross.org and click on the donate button. There are a lot of different options, including Bitcoin, that you can use to help Lyn and the Ulbricht family in their effort to get Ross's sentence commuted. We have just a few more minutes here today for the show, Lyn. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you'd like to discuss?
Well, thank you for mentioning the donations, because of course that's how the government crushes people, and it's just so expensive. But also, if anyone has political connections at any level, really, please let me know who might be willing to help us, because we're really in the realm of politics now and not the courts. And and please follow me and our case and everything on social media like Twitter. Facebook, Instagram, that would be really helpful. And because we've got to combat this narrative. And one other quick thing.
Sure.
One of the things we want to do to get President Trump's attention is for Free Ross supporters to show up at rallies. And so far, this has happened in New Hampshire. And I was actually told by a person in the political director realm of Trump's in the White House, is that they noticed the support and were impressed with it. They noticed the people that were there for Free Ross, that there is a movement, and we're trying to show that. And so then we had a group in Dallas show up again, and then two more coming up, Tupelo, Mississippi, and Lexington, Kentucky, and we're working on trying to get people to go to those. Even just a few people with some signs can make a big difference in terms of if you take pictures, you're on social media.
Right.
And so I'm trying to it's hard to know where he's going next, but I'm trying to organize that. And so if anybody would want to help with that, or, please watch out for that, and I'll be announcing them. I'm trying to think of anything I can.
Yeah, well, no, that's very good, actually, because that's the type of thing that the average person can do. If the president has a rally in their town, it won't even cost any money. Just draw up a sign, Free Ross, hashtag freeross.org, and get over there. I'm caused to recall that I guess earlier this year, or maybe in 2018, Kim Kardashian visited with Donald Trump. Obviously, she's a major celebrity, probably knew him before, but I think, wasn't her cause something to do with letting people out of prison who shouldn't be there? Have you had any contact with Kim Kardashian?
Well, I've tried. It'd be very nice if she would come out for Ross. Hasn't happened yet. She was instrumental in President Trump commuting another nonviolent drug offender, Alice Johnson, and it was great. I mean, she's an older woman. She was a great grandmother, and she was serving this horrible sentence. The other thing I was told by a lawyer who knew about it and was involved is that she also was smeared with murder for hire.
Oh. And
then I guess it was dropped. So it's something that happens, and that they do. But and Obama didn't pardon her. or commute her sentence, but luckily President Trump did, because it is such a heart-rending thing to see her running out of the prison into the arms of her family. I mean, it's just so, and you just go, why is this woman still in prison, for crying out loud? That's the thing. There's these sentences are lifetimes, decades and lifetimes. And it was, like I say, it didn't used to be like that. It didn't used to be like that.
Wow.
And when I was growing up, who got life sentences? If you had to be a mass murdering maniac. So it's just it's just changed, and it's changed for the worse. This is not American. It's wrong.
It's wrong. I didn't know that about the murder for hire thing, but it goes.
Well, that's not that well known.
Right, but it goes.
I wasn't told it was confidential, so I'm telling you.
I appreciate that. It speaks to the social engineering aspect of these cases, because it's not enough that they just attack the person.
Absolutely.
They need a social engineering campaign to control the public's perception. Interesting to note that the liars that are suing me, I've got my first hearing in one of the civil suits tomorrow. They have also introduced the completely false notion that I have somehow been involved with murder for hire. And again, that's what David Swigert has said in his pleadings in court against me. Because, you see, this is a standard playbook that these losers use, where they want to put this information out there in the public sphere so that if anything happens, they've got these sort of points of data that they can, show people. Oh, look, he did this, he did that, he did the other thing. So they put these statements out there, like what you just said. Barack Obama did not commute the sentence of Ms. Johnson, even though she's a member of the African American community, as is Barack Obama. But people say Donald Trump is a racist. Okay, so I haven't seen any evidence of that. I don't know how you could produce evidence of that, but it's a very subjective thing, obviously. I don't want to get into that conversation, but they put that term out there, and it's one of these things that they just keep saying. As with Ross, there doesn't need to be any evidence, but they can put it in articles, they can slip it in conversations, they can say this was alleged, and it puts a thought in people's minds that doesn't seem to help in these scenarios. So, Lyn, I have to say, I always feel so badly for you, for Ross, for your husband, your daughter. Every time we speak, you're such an amazingly positive person through all this. I have to commend you. You are the superstar mom of the century. What can you say to our audience in closing before we go?
Well, just that, we're at a tipping point in history. I've seen it myself, and I believe that. And it's, are we going to go towards a surveillance state and government suppression of innovation and persecuting people for ridiculous lengths of time? Or are we going to go towards creativity and innovation and progress and well-being for more people in the world? And we're at that tipping point. I really believe that. And which crossroads are we going to take here? Yeah. And I think that people really need to pay attention. And it's not just about Ross. It's not just, it's a much bigger issue. And we need to wake up and understand that we can lose the freedoms we have. Many have been eroded, but we can be in a much worse situation than we are even now. Much worse. And I feel like it's going towards that. And you can see it around you. And I think people need to wake up and push back.
I agree with you completely, Lyn. It's a really sad situation, and you're doing so much to make it right. I hope that you succeed, and I hope that Ross will be released soon. I want to thank you for joining me today. I would encourage our viewers again to go to freeross.org, sign the petition. Let's help Ross get his sentence commuted, and whatever you can do as far as supporting the effort financially, click on that donate button. Lyn Ulbricht, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too, Jason. Thanks so much.
Take care, and say hello to Ross for all of us.
I will. I'm going to see him tomorrow. I'll tell him.
Good. Thank you, Lyn. Take care.